Welcome to the SCR Connections June webinar. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Jeff Carlton, who is joining us in person in the SCR office this morning. We're very happy to have him with us. A brief introduction to Jeff. He is currently serving as the Director of Media Relations at UNT Health Science Center in Fort Worth, where he serves as the primary media contact, spokesman, and public information officer. In addition to identifying and pitching stories to reporters, he responds to media requests, handles executive communications, assists colleagues in preparing for interviews, writes and edits for the university's website and publications, and oversees a team of 2 writers. He began his journalism career as a sports reporter for the Albuquerque Tribune and also spent 5 years covering legal affairs and law enforcement for the Dallas Bureau of the Associated Press, where he won a Scripps Howard National Journalism Award for team coverage of breaking news. Jeff is going to be sharing with you today about telling your story to the press. I'm going to go ahead and hand it now over to Jeff. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Sarah. I'm not sure I can match that energy level, but I appreciate the good introduction. As she said, my name is Jeff Carlton. I'm the Director of Media Relations here at UNT Health Science Center. I've been on the public relations, media relations side of things for about the past 6 years. Prior to coming to the Health Science Center, I spent a couple years at UT Southwestern, which is another academic medical center. This one's in Dallas, and that was my first job on the PR side of things. As Sarah mentioned, prior to that, I was a reporter for about a dozen years. The first 6 at a great little newspaper in Albuquerque called the Albuquerque Tribune, which unfortunately no longer exists, and then about 5 or 6 years in the Dallas Bureau of the Associated Press, which is a big, gigantic wire service that fortunately still does exist and does some really good work. And the reason I mention that background is because it's put me on both sides of the media relations equation. I've been the reporter who's had to work with PR folks, media relations folks, and with organizations in order to get the type of stories that I wanted to write about. And now I'm on the other side of things trying to work with the media in order to get coverage of the institution I work for and our programs and some of our priorities. So I hope that's given me a little bit of insight into what we're going to talk about today, which is telling your story through the press. My goal for you today is really to get a better understanding of what reporters are looking for when they want a story, so that you know what you can present to them and provide to them that will increase the chances of your organization getting some coverage. I also want to help you prepare for an interview in the event that you do get a reporter interested in covering something that's going on in your organization, so that you feel confident going into those interview situations. As Sarah mentioned, I am going to be showing a couple videos. I want you to be able to see one example of an interviewee that does a really great job handling some tough questions. And then at the end of this, I have kind of my all-time favorite train wreck interview where everything really goes off the rails, and all the elements that we talk about today in preparing for an interview, you see everything kind of goes sideways. So I do want to share those with you. Debbie is going to put those links into the chat sessions, and I'll ask that you click on those links. We'll pause for a couple minutes so you can watch those videos, and then we'll continue the discussion. You do have the option to ask questions in that chat box. Please feel free to do so. I may stop and answer some of those questions in the middle of this presentation. I can read them as you post them. I'm used to giving this presentation in front of an audience as opposed to a webinar, so I encourage questions. If I don't get to them in the middle of the presentation, there will be some time at the end, and we'll go through the questions you ask and attempt to answer all of them. So I appreciate your engagement in advance, and please feel free to ask questions. Where I'd like to begin is discussing media relations really in a nutshell. I created this slide a couple years ago, originally as sort of a joke to explain to people here at the Health Science Center what my job was like. But let me give you a brief story that sort of illustrates what I'm trying to get at. At my first public relations job, which was at a medical center in Dallas, they had this rock star researcher who everybody was very invested in getting a lot of media coverage for. The university and one of the affiliated hospitals had spent nearly $150 million to recruit this guy and his research team and set him up in Dallas. And so I sat down with him, and I wanted to learn more about the work he was doing so that we could, start pitching it to local and national media outlets. And his specialty was in identifying the microenvironment in which blood-forming stem cells survive and thrive within bone marrow. So it was not something that was lay-friendly. It was not very accessible. It was a really hard topic to get reporters excited about, to get the general public excited about. This man's work is incredibly important, but didn't really translate to a media audience. At the same time that I was unsuccessfully trying to get this guy some coverage, we had a psychiatrist there that we referred to as Dr. Trainwrecks. And the reason we called him that was because he had coined a phrase. He was studying people who he felt were addicted to going to tanning salons and getting tanned. And his research found that for those people, tanning rewarded the same pleasure centers in the brain as people who use drugs or alcohol or gambling, and that it really was an addictive kind of behavior. So he coined this phrase, trainwrecks. And that story took off like wildfire. It was on all the national network morning shows. It went viral on the internet. And meanwhile, I had this pediatric cancer specialist who was studying these blood-forming stem cells, and we couldn't get any coverage of him. And that's really what I'm talking about with this slide here. When you're at your organization, there's a whole bunch of stories that your organization wants to tell about itself, some initiatives that we're working on, a guy researching blood-forming stem cells. But at the same time, on the left side, you've got stories that interest the media. And where I do my job and where you all need to do your jobs is in that sweet spot in the middle, where the stories that you want your organization to tell about itself overlap with stories that you think the media and therefore the general public are going to be interested in. I'm extremely protective of my relationship with reporters. There are far more PR people in the business today than there are reporters, and so reporters are constantly inundated with emails, with phone calls, with story pitches. Where you can make a difference is by making sure that when you send your story pitch to a reporter, that reporter is accustomed to getting credible, interesting story ideas from you. That when they see your name in their inbox, they're going to take the time to actually open that email, read your idea, and give it some consideration. So you need to be able to protect that relationship you have. And the way I protect it is by making sure that when I contact a reporter, I'm only sending them stories that I think are going to interest them, not just the stories that we want to tell about ourselves. We have a lot of great initiatives going on here at the Health Science Center, but a lot of them are really not of any interest to people outside our campus. And I suspect the same is for the organization that you're at. So you really need to consider who the audience is, whether the lay public is interested in the particular program that you're trying to promote, and only then do you begin to reach out to media and contact them. I used to be a reporter. I can tell you what reporters are looking for when they go to cover a story, and at the very basic level, they're looking for a good story. So what is a good story? What are the elements of a good story? You hear a lot today about reporters being biased. And I'm here to tell you that's absolutely true. Reporters do have a bias, but it's not towards what you may be thinking. Reporters are biased toward things like conflict and things like aberration. Those are often elements of a good story. By aberration, I mean things that go wrong when otherwise everything else is going right. You're never going to see the media report about all the planes that landed at the airport today. But if one plane crashes, they're going to be out there covering that because they have that bias toward aberration. When things go wrong, when there's sort of a negative element to a story, media are going to be a lot more interested than they otherwise would be. They're also motivated toward conflict when one side disagrees with another. That's an element of a good story. When I was a kid, my Uncle Bobby was a political reporter in New York City for the Daily News and then the Post. He covered City Hall. And we learned that I was interested in becoming a reporter. He used to tell me that his job was really simple, that politician A would call him up and say that politician B is being a real jerk about something. And then he'd run over to politician B and say, hey, guess what politician A just said about you? And then he had his story. He had the conflict that he wanted to write a good story. So you're looking for elements of a story that a reporter is going to be interested in. Some of those elements also include reliable information. All reporters today want good visual elements to a story, so that means good videos or photos or data or graphics. Even if you're dealing with a radio reporter or a newspaper reporter, those stories are ending up on websites and they need to have visual elements to help tell those stories. So you need to be thinking about what kinds of visual elements that you can bring to a story that would make a reporter more interested. Reporters need savvy spokespersons and or experts. That spokesperson may be you, or you may be the person that's connecting them to the expertise. But reporters need somebody available to be able to help them through a given issue. And finally, it's that availability piece that's really important. Reporters are casting a wide net these days to find experts on different topics. And if you're dealing with a local reporter in your own market, my rule of thumb is I basically have about half a day to respond to that person, line up somebody or line up the story and make sure that everybody's available to do it. If a national reporter is contacting you looking for some sort of expertise, you have an hour, maybe 2 hours at the most to find somebody and make them available to that reporter. So that window can be really tight. That's also where you can create an advantage for yourself in working with the media. If you're somebody who's going to respond quickly and get somebody on the line for them to deal with, then they're going to come back to you more and more. Reporters also need real people, and I can't emphasize that enough. And unfortunately, somebody like myself, or if you're a spokesperson for whatever organization or institution you're at, you do not count as a real person, nor does the expert that you may be setting them up with. You are not the real person. The real person to a reporter is somebody who's affected by the story or the issue that they're trying to report on. A quick example, here at the Health Science Center, we have this wonderful program called Asthma 411, where some of our public health experts teamed up with another group and worked to get nebulizers into local elementary schools to treat kids who have asthma attacks. Elementary schools don't have these nebulizers, so when a third grader gets an asthma attack, they have to call the parent or they have to call the paramedics, and the parents have to come and administer medication, or the paramedics have to come. Sometimes these kids end up in the ER. It ends up being a very costly, time-consuming, frightening process for a little kid who's having a very treatable asthma attack. What our program does is get these nebulizers into the schools, trains the nurses on how to use these nebulizers, and then it keeps the kid in school and turns a scary situation into something that can be handled right there. That's a really good story, but we couldn't get any reporters to bite until we found a school nurse and an elementary school kid who had had an asthma attack. We set the reporter up with that kid and his family, as well as the school nurse, let them tell that story, and then they interviewed our own people, and we got the coverage for the Asthma 411 program that we wanted. As another example, for those of you in Texas that are listening to this, you may know that Texas has the worst maternal mortality rates in the United States, and some of the worst in the entire Western Hemisphere. That's an important story that reporters should be covering, but again, we had a lot of trouble getting any interest in it. We have a maternal mortality expert who's on our faculty here. We had a hard time getting reporters interested in covering that story until we identified a mother who nearly died during childbirth and lost her baby, and she was willing to share her story with the media, and then we were able to get the coverage on that topic. So if you're at a library and you're working on a health education program for migrant workers, that could be a really interesting story for your local media, but you're going to need to find those migrant workers that are willing to share their story with the media in order to get coverage. If you're able to line up those real people, you're going to greatly increase the chances that a reporter is going to become interested in whatever program you're trying to promote. So those are some of the ducks that you need to get in a row before you contact a reporter. Reporters these days have a really challenging job. There is a speed element. They want to be fast and they want to be first. Like all of us, they're under tremendous deadline pressure. When I was a reporter at the Associated Press, I would start working on a story at about 9 a.m., and by 11 a.m., the editors in New York were wondering where that story was. If you're a TV reporter, you're often reporting for 3 different newscasts in the same day. You've got the 12 o'clock and the 5 o'clock and the 6 o'clock. You've got the 5 to 6 and the 10. So they're on this constant deadline pressure. So anything you can do to help them do their job quickly will increase the chances, of you getting coverage. One of the best things you can do, especially for TV folks, is have all the elements of the story lined up so that they can come here and within an hour interview your expert, interview your real person, get their B-roll, and get on their way. If you can kind of make everything real easy for them, a one-stop shop kind of story, then you're doing your organization a good service. Reporters, of course, want to be accurate. They want to be interesting. They want to tell interesting stories. And these days, there's also a need for reporters to be an instant expert. When I was at the Associated Press, I was only there for 5 years. Our office, the Dallas Bureau had 17 writers and editors when I got there, and we had 6 when I left. Newsrooms are shrinking, no matter whether it's TV, radio, or print. So the days of reporters being dedicated to covering specific beats, where they had gained maybe a certain level of expertise on a topic, those days are mostly gone. Most reporters are skilled generalists these days. They're general assignment reporters. They have to cover a wide variety of topics. And so any help that you can offer them in gaining some quick expertise or some quick knowledge about a given topic will be really appreciated. I work in a fairly large media market, Dallas-Fort Worth, and these days there is only one dedicated health and science reporter in the entire market. She works for the local NPR affiliate. She does a tremendous job, but the TV stations no longer have just solely dedicated health or science reporters, nor do the newspapers. The final bullet point up there is what I call the reporter's code. That's really not a challenge for the reporter. It's going to be much more a challenge for you as the spokesperson or you working for your organization trying to get media coverage. And quite simply, the reporter code is that you don't get to review or preview the story that they're working on about your organization. That's something that's trained into reporters. That's basic journalism training. You don't offer previews, nor do you allow your sources to review the story that you're working on. I work at a higher ed institution. That's really difficult for faculty members to understand because they live in their environment is a peer review environment where they submit a study, it's reviewed by a number of their peers, there's changes made, it's sent back to the original faculty member, there's some back and forth there. That is not how it works with reporters. Typically, you won't get to see the story they're doing until it posts online or until it airs on television or appears in your morning newspaper. In the 6 years that I've been on the PR side of things, one time I've had a reporter send me a story in advance to look it over and make sure that it was accurate. When I was on the other side of the equation as a reporter, there were a handful of times, I could probably count them on one hand, where if I had a story that involved a lot of technical information or was really complex, I might call up my source, read a few paragraphs out loud to make sure that I was properly explaining it, and then make any adjustments that I had to. But otherwise, there's really no reviews or previews, and it's kind of insulting to ask the reporter to see the story before it runs, and so I don't recommend doing that. It's sort of offensive to their personal professional code. Some may be willing, but in my experiences, most are not. That means that anytime you invite a reporter into your shop, onto your campus, into your library, you're taking on a little bit of a risk, sometimes a big risk. You don't know what that story is going to turn out like. There are some things you can do, and we'll talk about that, some things that may influence what the story looks like, but ultimately the final product is really out of your hands, and so there's an element of risk there. So you may be asking yourself, why would I take on this risk? Why would I risk some bad PR for the sake of a story or a reporter getting something incorrect? There are a couple really good reasons why we cooperate with the press. The first is credibility. There's plenty of research out there that shows that something that's read in the newspaper or seen on TV news is far more credible to the viewer or to the reader than a TV commercial or a billboard or a press release or something they even read on your website. There's still that savvy there from your audience that stuff on the news has been vetted to some extent and it's a lot more credible and it sticks with people a lot longer. So credibility is one of the top reasons why you cooperate with the press. Another reason is simply the reach of the mainstream media, even though it's shrinking, still far surpasses just about anything you can do on your own. Here at the Health Science Center, we have a small team of people that write a lot of stories for our website and handle our social media accounts. And when we write a story about a particular program or a particularly inspiring faculty member or whatever story we have, a story that does really well for us after we share it on social media and put it on our website, and we have a number of different ways to distribute our stories, but a story that does really well, our best performing stories have gotten about 20,000 page views. A really good story will get about 5,000 page views, and then most of them are far below that. But if we get WFAA, which is the ABC affiliate in Dallas-Fort Worth, we get a reporter to come out to our campus, do a story that goes on the 10 o'clock news, then 230,000 people are going to see that story. And that's just a lot bigger reach than anything we can do on our own. So working with the media is still just about the best bang for your buck when you're talking about communicating something about your organization. The Star-Telegram is still a hugely important audience for us, and whatever your daily newspaper is in your town should probably be just about your most important reporting contact as well. The Star-Telegram has about 150 to 200,000 readers every day, but more importantly, your morning newspaper tends to set the daily agenda for the other media outlets in town. The radio outlets, the TV outlets, all take a lot of their reporting cues from whatever appears in the newspaper that day. Newspapers are still, generally speaking, better staffed than your other media outlets, so they get to cover more, and then a lot of times TV and radio are chasing what the daily newspaper has in the paper that day. So you get something in that morning newspaper, and then it kind of amplifies from there because all the other outlets in town are more likely to pick it up. There are other reasons why we cooperate as well. An understanding public is a paying public. It's a great way to get information about your program or your organization or institution that may attract people, get them inside your building that may not have come otherwise. You never know when you're going to reach that deep-pocketed viewer who wants to be a donor. Some of our stories at the Health Science Center have led directly to donations from people who've just come across them. We haven't gotten any six-figure or seven-figure donations related directly to a media hit that I know of, but we have gotten some pretty significant five-figure donations, and we'll take those. A lot of you who work for state or federally funded institutions or organizations know that we're in a much tighter funding environment than we have been in years past, and that philanthropy has become a lot more important. So that deep-pocketed viewer is important. You also can reach your elected officials who control your budgets through the media. They like seeing their names in the press. They like seeing publicity for programs or organizations that they are helping to fund. It is a smart practice. If you're getting coverage for something that is receiving funding thanks to a friendly lawmaker, that you make a point of thanking that lawmaker. It may or may not make it into the story, but at least you've done it and you've created that chance to get that person's name in the paper. And then, of course, for us specifically, we have a research arm here, and media is a key part of translating research. So some of this stuff can be really complex for people, and media does a good job of making it more accessible to the general public. So those are other good reasons to cooperate with the press. So hopefully you have a basic understanding of what a reporter is looking for out of a story. You know why it's beneficial to you and your organization to cooperate with the press. So next, I wanted to offer you just a few basic tips about how to pitch a story to a reporter. Really, and for me, the most important element to remember is that you need to keep in mind who your audience is. And your audience is not you, and it's not your colleagues. So as I mentioned earlier, a reporter might be interested in different elements of a story than your organization is interested in. A quick example from my own time here at the Health Science Center, we have a wonderful program where we actually have a medical entomologist on staff who works in our School of Public Health. And every spring, late spring and all through the summer, he takes some of his public health students out, and once a week they go out and they set mosquito traps at 60 locations across the city of Fort Worth. And then the next day they go and they collect those traps, they bring the mosquitoes back to the lab, and they test the mosquitoes for West Nile virus. And if there's any signs of West Nile virus, they report it to the city. They tell you how likely it is that this may spread. They give some suggestions on how to control the mosquito population, and it's a weekly report. When we decided to do this story, what our faculty was really excited about and what our administration was really excited about and what the city of Fort Worth was really excited about is that this was a one-of-a-kind collaboration between a School of Public Health and a city health department. We couldn't find any other examples nationwide of these two types of groups combining on this sort of project to do mosquito monitoring. Now that's really nice. I understand the importance of that sort of collaboration, but if you're the average, newspaper reader or you're watching TV, the collaboration element to that story is really kind of the least interesting thing about it to your layperson. So what's interesting about it is that somebody's monitoring mosquitoes, catching them, and keeping an eye on West Nile virus and letting you know about it. So when I pitched this to the media, I kept it real short and sweet. I said, You can do a ride-along with our mosquito team that's trapping these mosquitoes. You can come back to our lab and get film of them, testing the mosquitoes for West Nile virus. And then I provided them with our full story below that they could read if they wanted to. But the top of the email was just 2-3 short sentences telling them about the visual elements of the story and really why they should care. And we got great coverage out of it. Every TV outlet in town ended up showing up and covering that story. And when they did come up, we had the mayor of Fort Worth here and we had our faculty member, and they got to make their points about this being a terrific collaboration between the city and the School of Public Health. But the main part of the story was mosquito monitoring, and it turned into great coverage for us. So those would be my main tips for you. I think email works best. Reporters are often too busy to take phone calls. If you are protective of your relationship with those reporters, as I mentioned earlier, then I would suggest, then I think email will benefit you because they're going to recognize your name. They're going to know that you offer them a good story. I think short is best. We do write, we're not really in the press release business anymore. We're in the storytelling business. So we write stories about a lot of these programs, and I attach those stories. I copy and paste them, put them in the bottom of the email. But the top of the email is always short and sweet, 3-4 sentences giving the basic outline of the story. And if they want more information, then they can read about it below. I'm going to stop for a second. I see a question from Kristen Newcomer at JPS. If you see it in the chat session there, she says, when you pitch to national media, do you target individual outlets or use something like PR Newswire? I think those, we don't have a PR Newswire account here anymore. I have not found them valuable in the past in terms of getting coverage. What they do is do a good job of generating, web hits for you. And what media monitoring services also do a good job of is helping you put together a media list and figuring out who's covering what topics. But for a lot of those type of services, I didn't always find that the bang for the buck was there. And I found that spending an hour or two doing your own research about national outlets, you end up getting what you need and figuring out who might be interested in your topic. So no, I do not use PR Newswire. I do try to more target individual outlets or individual reporters that I think may be interested in the topic. So thank you for the question. So those would be, again, I think email works best. Keep it short and make sure you're considering the visuals for all reporters when you're pitching a story. So you've got you pitched your story. You've got a reporter who's interested in coming out and covering your event. Now you've got to prepare for the actual interview. The first thing I tell people who are about to go on camera or talk to a print reporter is that you should be yourself. Just relax and be yourself. I also issue one important caveat, though. I work with a lot of faculty members who are teachers at heart. They're educators. And so they have this kind of burning desire to do a big data dump of information. They want to download everything they know about this given topic to a reporter. But a reporter doesn't really need all that information to do his or her job. And the more you give a reporter, the less influence you have over what's going to appear in the story. What you need to do is come up with talking points. There should only be 1, 2, or 3 of them, and they should be brief. That way, that is all the reporter has to choose from when they go back to put together their story, are the 2 or 3 things that you gave them. That way, you're ensuring that at least 1 or 2 of your key messages are going to make it into their story. If you give them an hour's worth of material, now they have an hour's worth of material to choose from when they're putting together a story, and they may choose the wrong thing. They may miss your main point, and what you want to convey to people in this particular story may not make it into the story. So 1, 2, or 3 talking points, keep it brief. Be yourself, unless yourself means that you want to tell everything you know about this topic to somebody, and then rein yourself in. Most of the interviews that we do here, I would say 90% of them, and I suspect most of the interviews that you end up working on at your organizations are not going to be gotcha interviews. They're not going to be tricky. They're going to be friendly. You're promoting a program. You have something really interesting going on. But there are times when you're going to face some tricky questions or some dicey topics, and it's really important to be prepared for those moments. I mentioned earlier that I'm going to show just a fantastic train wreck of an interview at the end of this presentation. And one of the things in that particular interview is that neither the media relations person nor the interview subject, who is somebody who had been interviewed countless times, he's a national figure, they clearly did not anticipate some of the questions that they most feared. And that's something you need to do. If it's a dicey topic, make sure that you put together a list of questions that you are most scared of answering, and then be prepared to answer those. It's also a good idea to come up with the questions that you hope are asked and prepare some good talking points for those as well. It's fine to draft some quotable comments or sound bites, and it's fine to rehearse those. I don't think you want to come off as having memorized a script. I think being natural is better, but it is okay to have a few sort of quotable comments or sound bites that you've practiced a few times so that they're ready when you need to talk. This is honestly my favorite tip, and I hope this is something you all write down or take with you. Most interviews end with the same question every single time. I ask this question at the end of nearly every interview I did when I was on the reporting side of things, and now that I'm on the PR side of things and I'm writing stories about our university, it's still the question that I end just about every single one of my interviews with. And it's always this: is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have? Or is there anything that you want people to really understand about this topic? Or is there anything that we didn't discuss that we need to discuss before we end this interview? Most reporters will end an interview with some variation of that question, and you need to be ready. That is the biggest softball you're going to get in the entire interview, and you need to be ready to knock it out of the park. So you should have an answer ready that reinforces your main message. You know, the bottom line for this is X, Y, or Z. Or the takeaway for your viewers or for your readers should be this. And you'll find that more often than not, that quote ends up making it into the story. I would say it happens far more often than it doesn't. And that's because you're summarizing your main message. Usually you're a little bit more relaxed because the interview feels done at that point, and so it becomes more of a conversation than a straight Q&A. And you end up speaking just a little bit more eloquently than you would have otherwise. So please make sure that if you're the one being interviewed or if you're helping to prepare somebody for an interview, that you get them ready for that last question, which is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? That's when you should be able to hit home your main message. I'm going to ask Debbie at this point if she can put the link to this interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci into the chat portion of the webinar. I'm going to talk about it. Let me talk about it first before you actually click on it. But one of the nice techniques that you can use, which is going to be on display in this video, is what we call bridging. You know, bridging from the question into the answer that you actually want to give. A lot of times you may find yourself in an interview where the reporter is not asking any of the questions that you actually want to address. And there's sort of an artful way to bridge to the answer that you would like to give so that you can get into your main talking points. We're a little bit removed right now from the 2016 presidential elections, but if any of you watched the debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, or really any of the Republican or Democratic debates prior to the nominations, you saw this all the time, and it probably drove you crazy. It definitely drove me crazy. And that's when a politician would be asked a question and they didn't even attempt to address what the question was. They simply answered whatever they wanted to answer. And what they failed to do in those situations was actually build some sort of bridge into the answer that they wanted to give. Somebody would be asked about, some sort of foreign policy issue, and instead they would just start talking about healthcare. And it's really disconcerting to the listener. It's really disrespectful to the interviewer, and it's a poor way to answer those sort of questions. If you want to build that bridge to the answer you want to give, it's really a kind of a two-part thing. The first part of it is to issue a short statement of disagreement with the premise of the question. That way you're honoring their question, you're addressing their question, but you're saying you disagree. So you could say, that's a common misperception, or let me be clear about what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this, or I understand that may be the perception, however, the reality is, and then move into the answer you want to give. It can be a really effective way to move from a difficult question into a territory that you feel a lot safer with, that you're a lot more comfortable with. So in this clip, I'll ask you to start it in a minute or two, but in this clip, it's going to be with Dr. Anthony Fauci, and he is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And he was on the Sunday morning CBS talk program with Bob Schiefert, another Fort Worth guy. This was in the middle of the Ebola crisis in Dallas. It was a year or two ago. I'm sure you all remember it. What happened was an immigrant from Africa ended up in a Dallas hospital. He had Ebola. A couple nurses at the hospital contracted Ebola. And there was a great deal of fear that there was going to be a nationwide Ebola outbreak. And Dr. Fauci went on this morning program to address those issues way at the height of this crisis when everybody was frightened about it. I'll ask you to watch 3 minutes of this clip. And at the minute 30 mark, Bob Schiefert's going to ask a question, and then he's going to ask a similar question at the 2:15 mark. So I want you to, in particular, pay attention to those moments. And what he's going to do is what a lot of reporters do. They use somebody else as a stand-in to ask the really tough questions. So Bob Schiefert's going to say, hey, listen, Dr. Fauci, Senator Rand Paul, who's also a physician, says this about Ebola. And then later he's going to say, Senator Rand Paul says this about Ebola. And both times you're going to hear Dr. Fauci build a bridge to the answer he wants to give. He will disagree with the question and then move into his main talking point. So please pay attention to those moments in particular. I'm going to pause here for about 3 minutes, and then we'll resume after you've watched the video.
You guys should have the link in the chat box. If you click on that link and scroll down on the page, it's the first video that appears. If you're unable to watch the YouTube video, you can read the script that's directly below it. We'll give everyone about 3 minutes to go ahead and do this. We'll be back in 3 minutes. All right, even if you have not finished watching up to the 3 minute mark, we are going to go ahead and pull you back and let Jeff continue with his presentation.
Thanks. I hope you got a chance to watch that.
the quotes from Dr. Fauci with that first question from Bob Schiefert at the minute 30 mark, his little statement of disagreement was, I don't think there's data to support that, and then he moved into his answer. And then the second question, which came at the 2:15 mark, he said, I'm sorry, but that's just not a concern. And then he moved into the answer that he wanted to give. And those were two particularly artful ways to do that, far better than the politicians you saw during the debates last year that never even addressed the question in the first place. A couple more interview tips. I give this piece of advice every single time somebody's about to talk to a reporter. Avoid the jargon. A lot of us work in pretty specialized fields, but when a reporter's come to talk to you, they are a layperson and their audience is are lay people. And so, you know, you're not talking to other PhDs or physicians, you're talking to family, friends, or neighbors. And that's what I always advise people who are about to be interviewed. Talk as if you're speaking to family, friends, or neighbors. You got to remember the audience. I had one of those all-news radio stations in town that's weather on the 7th and traffic on the 8th. And during their morning drive time show, there was some story about some new update in DNA technology to be used at crime scenes. And we have a DNA lab here with a lot of expertise. So I put one of our faculty members on that particular program and told him, you know, act like you're talking to family, friends, and neighbors. So the very first question comes out, and in the first sentence of his first answer, he starts talking about chimeras. And I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I had to look up what a chimera was. It's a single-cell organism that comes from many different zygotes, I believe. Somebody can fact-check me on that. But they cut him off. They started laughing at him. Whoa, doc, we don't know what you're talking about. Hold on, slow it down for us. And the interview didn't get much better than that from there. So you gotta avoid your professional jargon and make sure that you make sense to a lay audience. One of the takeaways when it comes to being interviewed, I hope you just be yourself. You know, you don't want to be too robotic. You don't want to sound like a PR robot. We have a sleep specialist here on campus. She's younger than most faculty members. She's really passionate about her field. When she talks about her sleep studies, her eyes get really big. She gets really excited. Her voice gets really high-pitched. But to me, it shows her passion for the topic, and some media folks might ask her to kind of tone it down and use a more, you know, professional tone. But for me, I think she comes off really well. One of the folks who used to run our DNA lab here was involved in a lot of missing person and unidentified human remains cases. I could pinpoint in every interview he did, it was usually about a cold case. I could pinpoint the exact moment when he was going to start crying during the interview because they would ask him about the meaning of his work. And he would always say, it was a great line, he would always say, I don't think that we ever provide closure to families, but I think the work we do can help them get some answers. And he said, I can't imagine if it was one of my family members not knowing what happened to them. And then he would start tearing up. And I thought that spoke really well of him. Reporters love it. Reporters love tears and emotion. But I thought it spoke to his passion. It spoke to the importance of the work he was doing. And I was fine that he got emotional in all these interviews. I thought it worked. So it's important to be yourself in these. Don't overprogram yourself. A few other quick tricks and traps when you're being interviewed, and we'll kind of run through these pretty quickly. Reporters a lot of times like to rephrase the question if they don't like the answers you're giving. They're hoping that you will say something a little bit different. Don't fall for that trap. Stick to your 1, 2, or 3 talking points. There are a lot of reporters who try to use dead air or long silences to get you to keep talking. I have a boss who does this to me, and I fall for it about half the time. So they'll ask you a question. You will answer that question. You think you are done answering, and then the reporter will just pause for a really long time, and a lot of people will rush to fill that silence. So just be comfortable with those silences. Wait for the next question. And try to stay out of yes or no, A or B, hypothetical type questions. It's perfectly appropriate to say, I don't really feel this is a yes or no issue, and then, you know, bridge into the answer that you want to give. Also, please, please, please avoid going off the record. It means different things to different people. It means different things to different reporters. Please understand that when a reporter begins talking to you and they have identified themselves as a reporter, reporters are trained that everything is on the record from that point on, unless you both agree to go off the record for some reason. there have been so many times where I've heard somebody say something really interesting and then say, oh, but that was off the record, by the way. Well, no, it isn't, not to a reporter. A reporter can choose to agree that it's off the record if they don't really want to use it anyway, or if they don't think it's important. I used to do that. Oh, yeah, sure, of course. But if it was important, or I thought it was useful for my story, a reporter is under no ethical obligation to agree that that thing was off the record. Off the record has to be done in advance, and you both have to agree on it, and you are better off just staying away from it altogether. There are obviously different types of interviews. There's interviews for print and online outlets. There's interviews for radio outlets. A lot of times those will be done over the phone. If you are doing a phone interview, I recommend standing up. Your blood is flowing, you think on your feet a little bit more quickly. If you are pacing around a little bit, that means you're not tapping your desk or clicking on a pen. I think you breathe a little bit better, so your voice sounds a little bit better. I should take my own advice. I'm sitting down right now, but I probably ought to stand up. So I would recommend standing up and minimize distractions. Turn off your computer monitor, put your phone away. If you're talking to a reporter, make sure that your focus is on that reporter. TV interviews are a slightly different animal. The most important question I get is always, what should I wear? It's not as important as you might think, but if you're a man, I would recommend a solid color sports coat and a white or light blue shirt. You want to avoid complex patterns, things that kind of look blurry or fuzzy on TV. If you're going to wear a tie, politicians know what they're doing. They wear a solid color tie for a reason, because it looks better, it pops out better. If you're a woman, I would avoid really bold colors or really complicated patterns, and any sort of like jangly jewelry, bracelets that might clang together and are audible during an interview, or jangly earrings that might sort of distract while you're trying to talk. For men and women, if you have a branded golf shirt, polo shirt with your institution or your organization's logo on it, that's always a good look for TV, and it has the added advantage of having your logo right there on TV for everybody to see. As far as B-roll and the two-shot, there's a certain artifice to TV interviews. The whole interview isn't just going to be a talking head interview where you're sitting in a chair and they're showing your head and shoulders. There's some stage acting that goes into it, right? So don't be surprised if the reporter asks you to do a walk and talk with them, because that gives them more footage to use. Or if they ask you to sit at your desk and act like you're typing away on your computer or walking through a door, they need that B-roll. The whole story isn't going to just be you talking. They need this other footage to show while you or the reporter is talking. So you should be prepared to cooperate with that. Ideally, you actually have some good visuals to show them, and that takes away some of those more awkward moments. And it's going to feel awkward because it is awkward. Some of this you're faking, and so you just need to be prepared that that's part of it. So I've given you some sort of best practices to follow, how to prepare for interviews, how to pitch a reporter, and now it's time to watch where everything goes awry. And that's in this interview that I'm going to ask you to look at in a minute here, but I'd like to set it up first. For those of you who are not familiar, Baylor University is about an hour and a half south of here. I apologize in advance if anybody from Baylor is listening in, but they've, for some time now, have been in the middle of a sexual assault scandal. There's been a number of sexual assault allegations against students there, and the administration has been accused of not responding in an appropriate manner. So at the height of this particular controversy, the president of Baylor is also the Chancellor Ken Starr, who was also the special prosecutor when Bill Clinton was president, a guy who has dealt with all sorts of media for 25 years now. He ends up agreeing to do an interview, and unfortunately everything goes off track here. You're going to see, especially given the topic, this is kind of surprising, but you're going to see a lack of empathy from him. You're going to see that neither he nor his media person were prepared to answer the tough questions that were going to come. The media person was downright rude to the reporter and her producer. The station here is a Waco station, and they clearly underestimated the outlet. I think they thought it was going to be a much friendlier interview than it ended up being. And it's also it may be the single biggest act of sabotage by a PR person that I've ever seen. What you're basically going to witness is Ken Starr getting his media training, his media coaching in the middle of the interview. That is not the time to get your media coaching. You have to get it before the interview. You have to go through your training beforehand, not while the interview is going on. So congratulations, all of you are ahead of the game because you've just sat through this for 50 minutes. So the link is in the chat box there. It's about a 3 or 3.5 minute clip. I encourage you to watch it. It's deeply uncomfortable sometimes, but you're going to see what happens when you are not prepared and don't follow some of the tips that we've just talked about.
So what we're going to do for time reasons, I'm going to ask you all to go ahead and save this link and watch it after the presentation. I know Jeff really loves this link in this video, but for time reasons, I'm going to ask him to go ahead and keep moving on with the presentation. So save that link and go watch an example of what not to do after this presentation's over.
Let me, sorry about that. Let me speed through the last few slides here so that we have time for questions. What I wanted to do is show you what happens when everything goes right, goes as it should, with the way you can do this or the way your media relations team can do this. This was one of our researchers here developed an experimental drug that looks like it holds a lot of promise to treat hot flashes and other symptoms of menopause in women without the harmful side effects of hormone replacement therapy. So we published this in a pretty high impact journal. Our team wrote a story about it. We shared it on social media, as we do, and then I sent a really brief pitch to a local newspaper reporter and her editor, who I have good relationships with. Just 3 or 4 short sentences. Got this new science development. It's an experimental drug. I explained quickly how it works. The full story, you can't see it here, but I put it below my signature in the email so they could get more detailed information about what it entailed. But you know, just in really a paragraph or two there, they have what they need to decide whether they want to do this story or not. And you can see in the upper right there, I sent this on Wednesday, July 22nd at 8:04 a.m. And then on Thursday, July 23rd, front page of the Star-Telegram, above the fold, top of the page, you see the story there. They used our photo, which was great, and it was really some really nice publicity for this researcher and for our institution, the kind of work we do here. So that's how it's supposed to go when everything goes well. That is it for my prepared remarks. I think I went a little bit long, and I do want to leave some time for questions if you have any. This is my contact information, and please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you very much.
All right, so if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat box. I'll give everyone a few moments to be thinking about their questions and typing them in the chat box. We'll do a quick Q&A with Jeff, and again, if you have further questions, you can contact him at the information there on the screen. Once we do that quick Q&A, I do ask again that everyone stick around for the final poll that we have to run and some final housekeeping. So we'll just see here if anyone has some questions for Jeff. Great, looks like we have a question in the chat box. Have you ever promoted the library for a news story here on campus?
I did. It doesn't happen often. I did about almost a year ago. As you all know, since you are on this call, this is now the hub for the South Central Region headquarters, I guess, for the National Network of Library of Medicine. And so that's a difficult concept to explain to the press. What I sort of did was try to explain that Fort Worth is now a major information hub for a five-state region when it comes to health and science information. And I worked directly with the editorial page at our local newspaper, and they ended up running an editorial, basically letting people know that this was now here and saying what a good thing it was for Fort Worth. So thank you. Good question.
We have another question. Do you have any suggestions on further training to prepare for media interviews and or on writing a pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. I am involved with PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America. There's chapters all over the country. In fact, there's a luncheon that I'm going to right after this, which is a media panel that they have today here in Fort Worth. It's the anchor for the ABC affiliate, the anchor for the Fox affiliate, a Star Telegram reporter, and a couple radio reporters. And they're there to tell PR people how they like to be pitched to and what they respond to. It's actually pretty similar to what we've just discussed today. So I think PRSA has some good programming. And then I don't know if you're in higher ed or not, but I'm a member of CASE. What the heck does CASE stand for? The Council, I don't know what CASE stands for, CASE. And they do regional and national trainings. I've been to both, and they get some really good people there and do a really nice job. And I found those to be beneficial.
And these were totally not pre-planned or anything, but if you would like additional training on media interviews and writing and you find a really good online course that perhaps costs money, you can apply for a professional development grant from our office. As long as you're associated with one of our network members, you can apply for funding to attend that session. So if anyone finds a really good training or knows of any good online trainings, please feel free to let our office know. We can go ahead and send that out to all of our members and let them know about the opportunities available online as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the questions here. Again, if you have further questions, you can contact Jeff at the information on the screen or contact our office as well. We're happy to answer any questions or pass any questions along if needed. I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to thank Jeff again so much for coming and being with us today and for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much.
So I'll go ahead now and stop the recording. Please hang on for just a minute for some final housekeeping.